Through the heavy rain, through the current, Jamie carried Porter to higher ground. He didn't set him down and run. He stayed, one arm wrapped around Porter's trembling shoulders, his own body blocking the wind-driven spray. "Where's your dad?" Jamie asked, breathless. "He's coming. My caregiver was supposed to—" Porter's voice cracked as they both realized Mrs. Henley was gone, her silhouette disappearing into the covered bus shelter 2 blocks away. The floodwater was like a living thing, rising with terrible patience, swallowing the playground, one metal beam at a time. 12-year-old Porter Rowland's cane had vanished seconds ago, sucked under by the current. His hands clawed at empty air, rain hammering his face, mixing with tears he couldn't hold back. "Help!" His voice barely carried over the roar of the storm. "Someone, please!" The caregiver who was supposed to be watching him had sprinted away the moment the downpour intensified, shouting something about taking cover, leaving him standing waist-deep in churning brown water. 2 women with umbrellas had rushed past, eyes straight ahead, pretending they didn't see the blind boy struggling to stay upright. A security guard in a yellow poncho had actually stopped, then kept walking when he saw the depth of the water, muttering into his radio about protocols. That's when 15-year-old Jamie Docks appeared, school uniform plastered to his skin, his father's industrial mop still gripped in one hand from the office cleaning shift. He didn't slow down to assess. He didn't shout a question. He just ran straight into the flood. "Hold on, I've got you!" Jamie's voice cut through the chaos. He wedged the mop handle between the submerged playground railings, bracing himself against the current. When the water surged harder, threatening to sweep them both away, Jamie made a split-second decision. He pulled Porter onto his back. "Wrap your arms around my neck," Jamie instructed, his voice steady despite the fear hammering in his chest. "I'm going to get you out of here." Porter, who'd been taught his whole life to be careful, to wait for his father, to trust only approved caregivers, to never depend on strangers, locked his arms around this boy's shoulders without hesitation. Because in Jamie's voice he heard something he rarely heard from anyone except his dad. Certainty. Not pity, not obligation, just pure, unshakable resolve. Jamie's legs burned as he pushed through the water. A broken branch slammed into his shin. He kept moving. Debris scraped his ankles. He adjusted his grip and waded forward. Porter's glasses pressed against his neck, the boy's breath rapid and warm against his ear. But Jamie never loosened his hold, never made Porter feel like dead weight, never let him believe for 1 second that he was anything but worth saving. By the time Oliver Rowland's Bentley hydroplaned to a stop at the edge of the flooded park, Jamie was sitting on a rain-slicked bench under the covered pavilion. Both boys drenched, covered in mud and park debris. Porter still clinging to Jamie's back, crying but laughing, refusing to let go. "He saved me, Dad," Porter whispered, his voice shaking. "Everyone else ran away. But he came." Oliver Rowland, billionaire, club owner, man who could buy solutions to any problem, stood frozen in his ruined white suit, staring at the impossible scene before him. His blind son carried to safety by a boy in a soaked school uniform, still holding a janitor's mop. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all began. 5 hours earlier, Jamie Thompson stood in the cramped break room of Rowland Tower West, counting coins into neat piles. $12 for the electric top-up, $8 for groceries, or $4.50 left until Friday's pay packet. "Jamie, you coming?" His father, Frank Docks, called from the hallway, pushing his cleaning cart. At 47, Frank worked double shifts, mornings at the council estate, evenings in the luxury towers that scraped the London sky. His back ached constantly. His son noticed everything. "Just finishing my homework, Dad," Jamie called back, erasing a physics equation he'd sketched on the back of a shift schedule. He worked at his father's side most afternoons, mopping floors in buildings owned by people who would never learn his name. It wasn't much, but it kept their flat heated and put food on the table. Sometimes. When it didn't, Jamie tutored younger kids for $5 an hour, fixed broken electronics for neighbors, did anything that let him help without making his father feel like he was failing. That afternoon, the rain started just as Frank's shift ended. His supervisor, Mr. Callahan, glanced out of the window and frowned. "You're walking home in this, Frank?" "We'll manage, sir. It's not far." Mr. Callahan hesitated, then handed Jamie an old umbrella from the Lost and Found. Take it. Can't have my best cleaner catching pneumonia. Jamie's pride wanted to refuse, but thinking of his dad's cough, he accepted. Thank you, sir. The route home cut through Kensington Gardens, the pristine park with its manicured lawns and accessible pathways designed for wealthy families. It was a shortcut that saved them 20 minutes. 20 minutes Frank could rest before collapsing into bed. Little did they know this decision would shatter every assumption Oliver Rowland had ever made about Worth. Meanwhile, across the city in a private medical suite overlooking the Thames, Oliver Rowland sat across from yet another specialist holding yet another report that confirmed what he already knew. His son Porter's blindness was permanent, genetic, irreversible. No surgery, no experimental treatment, no amount of wealth could restore his sight. But his perception, Mr. Rowland, the doctor said carefully, is extraordinary. He navigates by sound better than most sighted children navigate by sight. What he needs now isn't medical intervention. It's confidence, connection. Oliver nodded, throat tight. Ever since his wife Caroline died 6 years ago, it had been just him and Porter against a world that saw his son as fragile, limited, tragic. And lately, Porter had been withdrawing, refusing play dates, avoiding public spaces, spending hours alone in his room listening to audiobooks. He won't even go to the park anymore, Oliver admitted. Says people stare. Says he's tired of being the blind kid. Wait, I need to tell you something crucial here. That very morning, Porter had asked to go to the park one last time. Maybe today will be different, he'd said, fingers tracing the edge of his breakfast plate. Maybe today someone will just see me. Oliver had hired a new caregiver, highly credentialed, impeccably referenced, expensive. Mrs. Henley had 15 years of experience with special needs children. She'd smiled warmly during the interview. Don't worry, Mr. Rowland, he'll be in excellent hands. But Mrs. Henley had her own problems. An ex-husband behind on child support, a lawyer who only took calls during business hours. She'd figured one quick phone call while Porter fed the ducks wouldn't matter. He was 12, sensible, perfectly safe in a gated park. Those 5 minutes would nearly cost Porter his life. Can you imagine how terrifying that must have been? Porter had been standing near the fountain, listening to the water's echo patterns, when the sky opened up. Rain turned the pathways into streams in seconds. His cane, his lifeline, slipped from his wet fingers and clattered away, lost in the runoff. Mrs. Henley, he called, but she was 30 meters away, back turned, phone pressed to her ear, completely unaware. The water rose past his ankles, then his knees. His expensive Italian leather shoes, designed for grip on smooth surfaces, slid uselessly on the submerged concrete. He reached for the fountain's edge, missed, stumbled forward into deeper current. 2 joggers splashed past, hoods up, music in their ears. A mother yanked her daughter away. Don't stare, darling. Keep moving, avoiding his reaching hand. A businessman in a Burberry coat actually sidestepped him, muttering about a conference call, as if Porter were just another inconvenient puddle. Porter felt invisible. Worse than invisible, he felt like a problem the world had silently agreed to ignore. The current pulled harder. His legs buckled. The water climbed to his waist. Thunder cracked so close he felt it in his chest. And in that moment, Porter Rowland, son of a billionaire, surrounded by hundreds of people in one of London's busiest parks, was utterly, terrifyingly alone. They had no idea they only had minutes left. Oliver Rowland had commandeered empires with a handshake and dismantled competitors with a phone call. But standing at the edge of a flooded park, watching a teenage boy cradle his son, he felt utterly powerless. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Oliver's assistant had called them the moment Porter's smartwatch pinged a distress alert. But by the time they unfolded their equipment under the covered pavilion, the rescue was already over. What remained was the aftermath. 2 boys drenched to the bone, one still clinging to the other like a lifeline. Let's get you checked out, son, the lead paramedic said gently, kneeling beside the bench. Porter's fingers were locked in the fabric of Jamie's school shirt, white-knuckled and trembling. Porter, they need to make sure you're okay, Oliver said, his voice catching. Porter shook his head, rain-soaked hair plastered to his forehead. I'm not letting go. Jamie shifted slightly, adjusting his grip so Porter felt secure. It's all right. I'm not going anywhere. Only then did Porter's fingers loosen enough for the paramedic to check his pulse, shine a penlight past his clouded eyes, listen to his lungs. But his left hand never fully released Jamie's sleeve. Oliver stood back, arms crossed tightly over his chest, watching the scene unfold with a strange mixture of gratitude and rage building in equal measure. Where the hell was Mrs. Henley? He'd paid her a premium salary, more than most people earned in a month, for one simple job: keep Porter safe. His clubs had safety protocols thick as phone books. Every stadium employed dozens of security personnel trained for crisis response. Risk assessments were conducted quarterly. Liability insurance cost him six figures annually. Yet his own son had nearly drowned in a public park because a woman he'd trusted couldn't be bothered to look up from her phone. The shame of it burned hotter than the anger. Oliver Roland, who prided himself on control, on foresight, on building systems that anticipated every variable, he'd failed at the one thing that actually mattered. And this boy, this stranger in a soaked school uniform still holding a janitor's mop, had done what Oliver's money and planning couldn't. He'd been there. Mr. Rowland? The paramedic straightened. He's stable, mild shock, some scrapes, but he'll be fine. You should get him home, into dry clothes. Oliver nodded stiffly. Thank you. He turned to Jamie, who was trying to stand without dislodging Porter. Wait, please. Oliver reached into his jacket. Miraculously, his wallet had stayed dry in the inner pocket, and pulled out a stack of 50-pound notes. He didn't count them. Didn't need to. For what you did, I can't. There aren't words. Jamie stepped back, still supporting Porter's weight. You can't pay for right. The words hung in the rain-thick air between them. Oliver stood there, hand extended, money limp in his fingers, feeling more foolish than he had in 20 years. Of course, this boy who'd risked his life without hesitation, without calculation, wouldn't want to be bought. Jamie! A breathless shout cut through the moment. Frank Docks appeared at the pavilion's edge, still in his work uniform, soaked through from sprinting in the rain. He took in the scene, the paramedics, the billionaire with cash in hand, his son shivering but standing tall, and understood everything instantly. Without a word, Frank stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around Jamie's shoulders. The gesture was so simple, so purely paternal, that Oliver felt something crack inside his chest. Around them, phones had begun to rise like periscopes. Parkgoers who'd ignored a drowning child now couldn't resist documenting the aftermath. Camera flashes sparked in the gray light. Oliver heard whispers. That's Oliver Rowland. Is that his son? Who's the kid in the school uniform? Oliver Rowland, one of Britain's most powerful men, dropped to one knee in the mud, eye level with Jamie Docks, the janitor's son who'd saved everything that mattered. Thank you, he said, and his voice broke on the words. You gave me back my son. Jamie nodded once, uncertain how to respond to a kneeling billionaire. Porter reached out blindly, found Oliver's shoulder, squeezed it. Dad, they need to get home. It's cold. Oliver rose, brushing mud from his ruined trousers. Let me drive you, please. It's the least. Frank started to refuse. Oliver could see it in the set of his jaw, but then Jamie shivered despite the jacket, and Frank's expression softened. All right, thank you. The Bentley's interior smelled of leather and wealth. Frank and Jamie sat stiffly in the back seat, Porter between them, still holding Jamie's hand. Oliver took the driver's seat. His chauffeur was 20 minutes out, and the silence that followed was thick with everything unsaid. Porter broke it, his soft voice filling the space. Thank you, Jamie. Then again, quieter. Thank you. And once more, almost a whisper. Thank you. Oliver gripped the steering wheel and drove through the rain, watching in the mirror as his blind son leaned against the boy who'd given him back his life. Oliver Rowland sat behind his desk, the skyline washed gray by London's relentless drizzle, and flipped open yet another board packet. Headlines scrolled across his phone. Billionaire's son rescued, mystery hero unmasked. Rowland's security fiasco. Was flooding preventable at Rowland Arena? He'd built his empire on calculated risks, but today every headline felt like a personal indictment. A risk memo lay on top of the stack, flagged blood red by his assistant. Roland Arena, cost reduction drainage plan, low probability, localized flooding. Buried engineering jargon painted a clear picture. Drainage shortcuts to save six figures, flagged and downplayed last quarter. He remembered the signature at the bottom, his own in blue ink next to a line of small print. The pit in his stomach went cold. The flood that almost claimed his son and another boy, he'd signed off on the gamble. The boardroom was tense and silent. Legal counsel pressed, "We advise you settle quietly, Oliver. No need to admit liability, not unless an external audit finds proof." PR spun the story, focus on the heroism, downplay the infrastructure flaw. Meanwhile, rivals in the football world, hungry for scandal and relief from their own crises, fanned the media flames. Roland's negligence. Roland's luck finally runs out. He barely heard them. His mind kept circling guilt and faces. Jamie Docks, the janitor's son, his own staff would have dismissed at security. Porter clutching Jamie's arm, refusing to let go. The world was obsessed with the identity of the mystery rescuer, but Oliver knew the real story was what he had almost lost. He fired Mrs. Henley, the caregiver. No hesitation, no severance. Then he ordered a private audit. Check every Roland facility, every drainage plan. If corners were cut, I want the truth. The board protested, but he'd stopped listening. Jamie had acted with unhesitating courage. Why couldn't he? Late that night, Porter sat on his bed, hands folded, room silent except for distant rain tapping the glass. In darkness, he mapped the world by sound. Rain as braille, voices as landmarks, remembering the drumbeat of Jamie's heart as he was carried from danger. Even in memory, it was a feeling, steady, decisive, safe. Jamie didn't hesitate, Porter murmured to Oliver at the door. You shouldn't either. For the first time in years, Oliver wondered if the only thing that separated him from failure was luck and the courage of a boy who had nothing to lose and everything to give. Jamie stood at the flat's entrance, watching Oliver Roland step through it as if crossing into another world. The doorway frame was indeed peeling, paint curling like dry leaves. The radiator hissed in the corner, struggling to warm rooms that had never known central heating abundance. Everything smelled of bleach, Frank's attempt at dignity, mixed with kettle steam and the faint copper scent of cooking cheap cuts of meat. Oliver's Burberry coat seemed absurd here, almost offensive in its pristine tailoring. Porter moved through the space carefully, his cane tapping the worn carpet, Porter's fingers finding the edge of the sofa that had been recovered twice. Family photos lined the mantelpiece. Frank and Jamie's mother on their wedding day. Jamie as a toddler, faded snapshots of better years. Please sit, Frank offered, and Oliver lowered himself onto the settee as if it might collapse under him. Tension filled every silence. Oliver reached into his jacket. The check was already written, £50,000, more money than Frank earned in 5 years. I can never repay what your son did, but Frank's hand came up. He took the check, looked at it for 3 seconds, and tore it in half. The pieces fell to the floor like snow. My boy didn't rescue for sale, Frank said quietly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Oliver went pale. Porter's head tilted toward the sound of tearing paper, his blindness somehow making the gesture more piercing. Silence stretched across the room. Unbearable, clarifying silence. Oliver set down the broken pieces and looked at Jamie, really looked at him, for the first time as something other than a rescuer or a symbol. What would help, he asked, stripped of CEO armor, genuinely asking. Jamie glanced at Frank, then back. Internships, he said, words tumbling out fast. Tools, a chance to build things that make life easier. I want to study engineering, but I can't afford university. Can't stop working. If I had time, resources? He trailed off, embarrassed by his own hunger. For people like me, Porter added suddenly, his voice bright with possibility, Jamie could design things that actually help, not charity, real solutions. Oliver nodded slowly, understanding blooming across his face. No handouts, no redemption purchased with checks. Work, partnership, purpose. I have a lab at the club, Oliver said. Innovation space. What if you came after school, worked on real projects? And Porter, you'd be there too. Not as my son, as a consultant. Someone who understands the problems firsthand. Jamie's breath caught. Frank's hand found his son's shoulder. Not approval exactly, but acknowledgement of possibility. One condition, Frank said. No special treatment. Jamie earns his place. Agreed, Babfun, Oliver replied. Porter reached across the space between them and found Jamie's hand without hesitation, squeezing it once. In that gesture, blind boy and rescued boy, billionaire's son and janitor's son, something shifted. Not gratitude, something deeper. Recognition. The kettle whistled. Frank stood to make tea. And in the docks flat, with its peeling paint and its bleach-clean floors, a revolution began. The first time Jamie walked through the biometric gates at Roland's Innovation Lab, his school uniform felt like a costume. Too thin, too visible. Staff members stopped mid-conversation as he passed, their eyes tracking him the way security cameras do. He kept his head down, pressed his ID badge against the sensor, stepped into a climate-controlled world of polished concrete floors and workstations that cost more than his flat. New intern, someone whispered. The rescuer's friend, someone else replied. He hated the title. He wasn't a rescuer. He was a boy who'd been in the right place, and now he was being treated like a mascot in a world that had never wanted him before the flood. The training pitches beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows were immaculate, pristine grass groomed with military precision. Players in Roland kits drifted past the lab, not noticing Jamie, or if they did, seeing through him. This was Porter's birthright, these spaces, this ease, this assumption of belonging. Jamie had to earn every second of it. Porter's world. 3 days later, Jamie brought a prototype to Porter's school, a wrist device the size of a chunky watch, bristling with sensors. They'd call it the Echo Band. During the assembly, Porter stood on stage and Jamie explained the concept. Haptic pulses that mimicked echolocation, giving blind users real-time feedback about obstacles. Some kids leaned forward, genuinely curious. Others smirked, the kind of pity-tinged smile that made Porter want to scream. A PE teacher cornered Jamie afterward. Could you do a selfie with Tisha kids? You're sort of a famous it now, yeah, the hero? Jamie felt his jaw tighten. I was just there. But the teacher had already raised his phone, already begun treating him like a commodity. The lab, where everything changed. The first prototype buzzed like a hornet's nest, hypersensitive, firing pulses at every shadow. Jamie tweaked the sensor arrays, recalibrating, squinting at code that refused to cooperate. It's like being attacked by invisible bees, Porter said dryly, wearing the band. Then more gently, too eager, it needs rhythm. They iterated 16 times, 17. On the 18th, something clicked. Jamie had adjusted the pulse frequency. Porter narrated what his ears already knew. The echo patterns, the spatial gaps, the rhythm of safe passage. That's home, Porter whispered, feeling his way across the lab without his cane. Jamie watched him move. Unsure if he was inventing something or remembering something his friend had known all along. Oliver found them like that. Jamie hunched over a circuit board, Porter sitting cross-legged beside him, the prototype glowing soft green in the lab's afternoon light. For the first time in weeks, Oliver didn't approach as the owner, as the dad trying to compensate for guilt. He pulled up a stool and simply sat, watching them work. Hand me the microcontroller, Jamie asked Porter, not looking up. Porter reached across the table, finding it by touch, handing it over with the ease of people who'd learned to move as one. Oliver recognized something in that exchange. Not obligation, not pity. Partnership. The kind of seeing that had nothing to do with eyes. He started showing up every afternoon, not as owner, not even as dad, just as someone present, learning to witness. Jamie was sorting through recycled materials in the lab, old circuit boards, copper wire, salvageable components, when his hand caught on something wedged beneath crumpled paper, a red-stamped PDF, folded twice. Drainage simplification, Roland Arena South, the header read. Date, 14 months prior. Cost-benefit analysis in Oliver's neat corporate shorthand. Projected savings, $287,000. Risk assessment, low probability, localized flooding. And there at the bottom, Oliver's signature in blue ink. Jamie's stomach dropped. The memo detailed exactly what had been cut: subsurface drainage channels around the park's perimeter, reduced catch basin capacity, and redirected stormwater runoff that could have prevented the flooding. Every word was corporate efficiency disguised as progress. The flooding that nearly took Porter, the flooding that had brought them together. Oliver had known the risk. That night, Jamie found Oliver alone on the empty stadium concourse, the vast, echoing space beneath Roland Arena where no one could hear them. The lights were low, casting everything in gray. "Your stadium helped flood that park," Jamie said, his voice bouncing off the concrete walls. Oliver didn't move, didn't defend himself. When he turned, his face was carved from exhaustion and shame. "Yes," he said simply. "Porter nearly died because you chose profit over—" "I know," Oliver interrupted, his voice hollow. He held out his hand. The memo was already there. A copy, Jamie realized. Oliver had known Jamie would find it. "I signed off on the shortcuts." I rationalized it. Low probability, I told myself. Acceptable risk. Those words cost a boy his life. Or nearly did. Jamie's hurt crystallized into something sharper: betrayal. This wasn't abstract corporate failure. This was Oliver, the man who had sat beside him in the lab, watching them build the echo band together, pretending redemption while a lie sat underneath. "I'm going public," Oliver continued quietly. "I've already prepared the statement. The memo, the negligence, the drainage failures. I'm fixing the system, full restoration, regardless of cost. I'm compensating every family affected by the flooding. And I'm stepping down from 3 of my club positions pending an independent investigation." "Why?" Jamie demanded. "Because Porter was right," Oliver said. "That day in the flat, when you wouldn't take the check, he understood something I didn't, that some things can't be bought back. You can only choose going forward to be better." Oliver looked directly at Jamie then. "But I need you to know something. The Echo Band, it can launch under the Roland banner, or it can launch under another. That's your choice, not compensation, just choice." Jamie walked to Porter's flat that night, the memo in his pocket like a stone. "Your dad's trying to be the man you think he is," Jamie said, laying it all out. Porter listened to the whole story, his hands folded. When Jamie finished, Porter said simply, "Then we hold him to it." And Jamie understood. Forgiveness wasn't absolution. It was something harder, the choice to let someone rebuild in front of you while keeping watch. The lab became their sanctuary, a place where failures didn't sting quite as much, where iteration was permission to be imperfect. Jamie spent nights milling aluminum casings on the club's CNC machine, engineering lighter, more durable housings that wouldn't catch on fabric or jewelry. Porter sat beside him, refining the haptic language in real time. 3 short taps means step down, he'd dictate, not panic. Make it gentle. Make it sound like a friend warning me, not a siren. Frank arrived most evenings with leftover cable ties from his night shift at a distribution warehouse. Bundles of industrial-strength cordage that Jamie incorporated into the prototype's housing. "This'll hold," Frank would say, examining Jamie's design. Strong but not proud about it. A club physio, Rosa, volunteered to test gait feedback and how the haptic pulses calibrated to walking patterns, stride length, the subtle balance shifts that kept people upright. A women's team striker named Zara, who happened to be Porter's neighbor, tested crowd noise interference in the stadium itself, walking corridors thick with sound, reporting when the haptic signals cut through the roar and when they got lost. Prototype 2 buzzed erratically, triggering false positives on stable ground. Prototype 4 short-circuited in light rain. The casings weren't sealed. Prototype 5 caught Porter's jumper, nearly tripping him, scaring Frank enough that he forbade further testing for a week. "We stopped," Frank said, his voice final. But Jamie found him the next morning and said simply, "We're building what the storm stole." Frank looked at his son for a long moment, then nodded. Prototype 6 improved the ceiling, but remained inconsistent. Prototype 7, built from everything they'd learned, every failure parsed into wisdom, wisdom was different. Jamie had redesigned the sensor array in a triangular formation. Porter had separated the haptic feedback into three distinct patterns: gentle, steady pulse for clear path, quickening tap for approaching obstacle, urgent double pulse for imminent danger. The rain tunnel, a testing chamber the club used to simulate weather conditions, became their proving ground. Porter walked it blindfolded, the echo band on his wrist, while Frank, Rosa, Zara, and Jamie tracked his movements from behind observation glass. He moved with confidence. The device guided him around obstacles the designers had hidden: a chair, a step, scattered debris. When he reached the end, emerging from the spray, Porter was smiling. "It works," he said simply. "It actually works." They named it Echo Band, a tribute to the sound that had saved Porter, to the listening that Jamie had done in the storm. That night, someone leaked the story to the press. "Roland Air nearly drowns. Owner knew flood risk." The headline hit like a punch. Reporters descended on Roland's offices, demanding statements. Legal teams spiraled. Oliver's confession, meant to be controlled, became tabloid ammunition. Worse, a storm warning was issued for the weekend. A system moving in from the Atlantic, rain predicted to be biblical, flooding probable in low-lying areas. The park where Porter had nearly drowned. The same playground. History was preparing to repeat itself, and this time, there was no guarantee of rescue. The press conference was meant to be a moment of reckoning. Oliver Roland, billionaire and architect of negligence, standing before cameras to confess his sins. The Roland Arena forecourt had been arranged perfectly. Microphone, banner, controlled lighting. The intention was transparency. The execution was interrupted by the sky tearing open. Rain came sideways, biblical and immediate, turning the forecourt into a river in minutes. Sirens wailed. The weather alert on every phone screamed, "Severe flash flooding. Seek high ground immediately." Oliver stood at the microphone as water lapped at his ankles, and he didn't step back. "I own this failure," he said, his voice steady against the roar. "The drainage shortcuts, the risk memo I signed, the corners I cut for profit, all of it. My negligence nearly cost my own son his life. I'm releasing full documentation. I'm restoring drainage systems immediately regardless of cost. I'm compensating every family affected. And I'm stepping down from—" "Sir, we need to evacuate." A staffer grabbed his shoulder. "Open all facilities," Oliver commanded instead. "Every club space becomes shelter now." The forecourt transformed into chaos and grace simultaneously. Frightened families poured toward the stadium's emergency exits. Stewards directed crowds toward upper levels, away from the flooding ground floors. Power flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed the arena. People screamed. That's when Jamie appeared, drenched, with crates of echo bands. He snapped them onto volunteers' wrists in seconds, shouting instructions: 3 taps, clear path; quick pulse, obstacle ahead; double pulse, danger. Move people by the pulses, not the panic. Porter stood in the central atrium like a sonar tower, listening to the acoustic geography of the stadium, calling directions through the darkness. "Left gates jammed, route them through the kit tunnel. Main stairs are flooded. The pulses will guide you right. There's a drop at corridor 7, warn them." Then a child's scream pierced the chaos. "Toward the culvert!" someone shouted. A 6-year-old had wandered toward the runoff system, the open drain designed to channel water away from the arena. Jamie moved without thinking. He grabbed an echo band, wrapped it around his own wrist, and ran into zero visibility spray where the culvert's mouth yawned open like a throat. The haptic pulses guided him through the blind white noise. Left, right, step down, his own body reading the device's language as he'd never done before. 5 meters ahead, impossible to see through the rain, he found the child pressed against the culvert's edge, crying. Jamie lifted her onto his back, exactly as he'd lifted Porter weeks before, and let the echo band be his eyes. When he emerged carrying her, Frank was there. Oliver's mop handle wedged into the floodgate to keep it propped open against the pressure. Frank's body braced against the frame. Frank's hands steady as strangers streamed past him toward safety. Oliver stood at the inner doors, soaked through, holding them open. Not as a billionaire, as a man who understood finally what his power was actually for. Porter stood in the doorway between, listening, mapping the refugees by their footsteps, their breathing, the sound of their fear transforming into relief. The impossible happened again, not by chance this time, by engineering, by courage, by a team of people from broken places coming together to build something real. By design, they saved everyone. The playground was renamed before it was fully rebuilt. Vision Park, a deliberate choice, a daily reminder of what sight truly meant. Months had passed since the second flood. The drainage systems around Roland Arena were now state-of-the-art, designed with redundancy and grace. Geo-drainage channels, permeable surfaces, overflow systems that channeled water away from populated areas. The park's reconstruction included buried catch basins and gravel trenches that would absorb rainfall instead of drowning it. Every family affected by the flooding had received compensation. Oliver's board had been reshaped with community representatives, including Frank, who now sat in meetings where his voice carried equal weight to accountants and lawyers. The Doc's Roland Foundation was operating in 6 cities now, funding tech apprenticeships for low-income teenagers and accessibility programs at every Roland Club facility. Jamie was the face of it, not by choice, but by consequence. The boy who'd become an engineer not through university, that was coming, scholarship secured, but through necessity and courage. Echo Band had rolled out to schools across London. Jamie watched the montage through his phone. Blind children navigating corridors they'd feared, cane tips tapping in rhythm with soft haptics, their faces shifting from terror to wonder as independence became possible. One girl, age 8, had cried when she first walked across a playground alone. Late afternoon light filtered through the rebuilt park's trees as Oliver found Frank on a bench. Not the bench yet, just one nearby. They sat in silence for a long moment. "That check you tore up," Oliver finally said. "You kept me from taking the easy way out." Frank nodded. That was the point. They shook hands, not as billionaire and janitor, but as peers who'd both learned that some things couldn't be fixed with money, only with conviction. As dusk fell, Jamie and Porter arrived at the original bench, the place where the first rescue had ended. They sat together as they always did on anniversaries, as the rain began to fall again, light and steady. "People ask me what you look like," Porter said softly. "I tell them I don't know." "Only that you sound like courage," Jamie smiled. "And you sound like home." The rain became heavier, drumming on leaves. Later that evening at the Vision Park dedication ceremony, Jamie stood before a small crowd of children, some sighted, some blind, some both and neither, and spoke. "True sight isn't in your eyes," he said, his voice carrying across the damp grass. "It's in how you choose to see each other. It's in the choice to stop when someone needs help. It's in the choice to build things that make life easier. When the water rises, and it will rise, the world is changing. Be someone's eyes. Listen harder. See deeper. That's real vision." The rain intensified, becoming applause on leaves. Porter stood beside him, not watching, but listening, as he always did, to the sound of a world that had learned, finally, that sight was something we gave each other. Oliver watched from the back of the crowd, no longer needing to apologize. He was simply present, witnessing the impossible made possible. 2 boys from broken places, building something that would outlast them both. If this story moved you, share the moment. Don't let it fade. Follow Motherland Stories and tap that like button to keep these voices alive. Every day we uncover strong stories, raw truths, and quiet acts of courage that shape our world. Join a circle of listeners, dreamers, and changemakers, because every story deserves to be heard. This wasn't just an episode, it was a call to remember. Silence hides injustice. Courage exposes it. At Motherland Stories, we don't turn away. We bear witness. Subscribe and stand with stories that challenge power and celebrate truth.